Right. Half a day. We are live, Hungen. Just checking the live stream right now. Hungen, we do appear to be live. Give me 1 second, Hungen. The live stream. Yep. Matsotso esti. Ki esti na banda lokwi, Hungen. There we go. Yay. Everything is working now, Biba.
Viva, viva.
All right. Okay. Give me 1 second. There we are. We're on YouTube. We are on Instagram, Hungan, and we are on Facebook. Okay. Right. Okay, we are all good. All right. Hafade todo samzu gwena hudzong estigiun nuebu na episode Fanatsu. Hafade. We are here for another episode of Fanatsu. Guahui host Mizutatlu, si Michael Luhan Bavakwa. And you know, we are getting towards the end of 2025 for Fanatsu. Uh, And I wanted us to have something special as we reach the end of this year. And it has been a tough year on a number of different fronts. And I wanted something which strikes, a little bit closer to kind of the heart of these islands and the heart of the Chamorro people. And so looking at the Marianas, one of the things that has been with the Chamorro people for thousands of years, but one of the things that has lived and breathed and sung and flown alongside the Chamorro people across our history. But looking at Guam today, looking at the Northern Marianas today, something that is a symbol of tragedy, especially in Guam today, is our bird population. Now, of course, when I'm speaking of our bird population, I'm not talking about chickens because the chicken population on Guam is quite healthy according to the noise outside your window when you wake up in the morning. But when we're talking about our native birds, our endemic birds, um, this is something which, when we think about our islands, when we think about reaching back, today, if we were going across social media, people were sharing their Spotify Unwrapped. People were
Hmm.
sharing, Bad Bunny was my number one, Taylor Swift was number two, see Kendrick Lamar number three. I'm running out of artists that are contemporary enough because I don't listen to that much music. Who else is out there? Sabrina Carpenter is somebody
Oh,
people listen to nowadays, Ungan. All right, and so people are doing that, but before in the past, who was the soundtrack of life in the Marianas? Ipalumacia, the birds, because everywhere you went, the birds were singing. And so it is only recently, and especially in Guam, that there is silence, military planes, sort of tourist buses. These are the noises that fill our lives, but for so long it was birds. And so I wanted us to talk about birds, and I wanted us to talk about sort of the possibilities for reconnecting with bird populations, birding, but I also wanted to get some updates from what is happening in terms of the restoration of bird populations in the Marianas. And so I'm very happy to have with me somebody who has been working, he's a postdoc working on native bird restoration projects. He's also the co-founder of the Friends of Dono, Friends of Island Dono, and also the president of the Marianas Audubon Society. Martin Kastner here. And so, Sidzus Masi Parifinatomu, thank you so much for joining for this Fanatsu episode where we're going to talk about birds in the
let's do
Marianas.
it. Let's do it. I mean, nothing better. Well, first of all, yeah, just massively honored to be here, to be kind of one of the voices for the birds in Guam. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing I like better than talking about birds. So I guess you brought on the right person. But yeah, half a day, everyone. So my name is Martin Kastner. I am not from Guam originally. I grew up in the beautiful city of Montreal, Quebec, but I've been in Guam for over 10 years now. And I moved here specifically to work on birds in Guam. So my background is basically my background and kind of my passion is in endangered species recovery. And so before moving to Guam, I spent 6 months in the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean and just learning about endangered bird recovery projects there. And after that, I went home, was kind of freezing in the winter, and I saw this job on Guam for, I think it was avian restoration technician. So let's try it out. I didn't know too much about the island. Ended up here and never really left. And so yeah, I mean Guam is where most of my professional career has been in terms of just working to do what we can to bring back bird song to the island. It's also where I really became a birder. I mean, I was not, like a lot of people don't think of Guam and birding and the two going together, but I mean, I've found, just so much kind of to fascinate me in terms of birds in Guam and the Marianas and the whole region. And so yeah, I mean, from just my work and then birding for fun and then the different initiatives that I've been involved with over the years, I've kind of somewhat become the bird guy in Guam despite myself. Also, I hit my 30s, so I guess that's when people say you kind of get into birding and that kind of thing. So it's true, it happened to me, and hopefully it'll happen to a lot of you as well.
Sidzus Mase. Now, thank you so much for that introduction, because and I do want to ask you this though, because I think I'm always fascinated because how was your connection to birds? Was it something that were you intrigued from a young age? Were you did you or was it something that came sort of a little bit later? I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you that.
So for me, I mean, it really was from a young age. Like I was just one of those kids that was obsessed with animals in general. So I grew up in the city. Right? I grew up. My parents didn't own a car. There was just pigeons and sparrows around. Like nothing. I really don't remember. Like I don't have much of a memory of birds. I mean, if anything, Guam has more birds than the neighborhood I grew up in. And, but it was just from books. Like none of my family is really into birds. Like, they're kind of into nature and traveling a little bit, but just no birders in my family. At least at that point, it's changed a little bit. But yeah, I had a few books, just a couple of like this animal atlas I remember, and a few other things, and I'd go to the library and just read about it. And so that was basically it. I loved animals. I was so obsessed, but yeah, I didn't really see a future for myself in this field, and so I was really kind of on the pre-med track, like a lot of people in biology, and just I have doctors in my family, but eventually I just kind of took a hard left turn, you could say, when I hit after undergrad and just got into wildlife, into conservation, and those kinds of fields. And so that's where I really found my passion. And really, like I said, my number one obsession is endangered species recovery, just kind of bringing species back from the brink or even bringing back missing species. And so, I mean, there's nowhere, that I feel like I could really put my passion to better use than in Guam, or at least not too many other places. But then, yeah, really like birds came after. So it was being here. I mean, my first kind of what birders would call a spark bird, just something that really gets you going in terms of just like looking for birds in general, was we were just kind of on Anderson between Solly surveys, just sitting there with my friend, and we saw um, well, she saw this bird like way off in the distance, just on the edge of the jungle, and we were, just sitting there by the golf course on base, and I said, isn't it just a drongo? And she said, no, I don't think so. So I picked up the binoculars, and it was this amazing like Australian bird called a dollar bird. It's like turquoise with a red bill and like red feet, and just kind of this big. interesting looking bird. And that was kind of my first spark of like, okay, birding on Guam can actually be amazing. Like you can get birds from Australia, they can come from Asia, they could come from, Southeast Asia, they could come from the Americas, or just anywhere in the ocean. And it's like such a cool place to look for birds. So that was where kind of I really got into birding per se.
No, Biba. No, and Sidus Masi. So let's first start off with just when you say birding, what do you mean exactly by birding?
Yeah, I mean,
And is it kind of is it like a is it kind of like a really serious endeavor? Is it kind of can it be a more casual thing? Because like for example, I'm a nerd, but I'm definitely not a cosplayer. So does birding have different layers like that? So like I wouldn't like for example, I like birds, but I am not to that level where I go out and look for birds and stuff like that. So can you talk a little bit more about when you're saying birding, what exactly do you mean?
yeah, well, I'm also a nerd, also not a cosplayer. So I'm right with you there. But yeah, I mean, just like with that, yeah, level. I mean, it's whatever you want it to be. So, like people think of it, they might think of like, you know, um, people with binoculars and a telescope and, like a big sun hat, and maybe they're 80 years old and just, like spending tons of money traveling the world for that. There are those people,
Yeah.
and
Oh, okay, okay, good. Because yeah,
but
I'm definitely not that.
but there's also, like anyone, like I would say, I mean, based on what I know about your interest in birds, about, what Guambus has done, like you're a birder. Sorry to break it to you, but it's like whatever you want it to be. So if you appreciate birds in your backyard, whether they're chickens or like our tsungi or white terns flying around, like that's all good. There's a million ways to bird. That's like what people say. And so it's really just appreciating birds. I mean, like right down the middle, like a classic birder would be someone who might keep some notes, who might keep a list, but it doesn't have to be that. I mean, not at all. Like really just kind of, I think birding is an American word.
Mm,
In Europe, in the UK, for example, they call it bird watching. I think that's kind
mm,
of a nicer way to put it. Like bird watching is, you just enjoy watching them because they're fascinating.
mm. Yeah, I mean, because for me, I think part of it is like comparatively, because for me, I don't think of myself because of necessarily as being like a very committed bird watcher. But then compared to some other people, I definitely love birds. So like the first time that I went to Saipan or Rhoda and really with the knowledge of birds saw native birds
Mm,
and like found them and followed them and spent time in the jungle, like it brought me to tears.
mm,
And then even one of the first times that me and my family went to like Donu
mm,
to Cocos Island, Island Donu. It was funny because I told my kids, my older kids, Maya and Akli'i, who are like middle school age, then
mm.
let's look for cocoa birds. And they were really excited. They were so excited. Let's look for cocoa birds. And so then we were like skulking around in the jungle, seeing if we could spot one, and they got bored real fast. And
Fair.
they were like, "This sucks. Let's go swimming." And I was like, "Shh."
Yeah.
And then I was like, maybe I am really into birds because I'm willing to
Yeah,
wait
no.
out here to
But
try to catch a cocoa
it's kind of what you
bird.
said earlier, right? Like it's not just watching them, also listening. Like I think you go to Saipan, Luta, like,
Hmm.
even Dano, and it's like not only like you get to see them, but like you hear them, and you hear them in the jungle, but also like around the villages and stuff. And like that's kind of an amazing experience. And yeah, I mean, like you said, something that can be lacking on Guam, but depending on where you are, you might hear some Sali, and if you go to Dano, yeah, you could really take it in, and yeah, it's a cool like full kind of immersive experience.
Now, I wanted to share because you shared some pictures with me of some birds
Mm,
from the Marianas. And so I wanted to share them and then kind of talk talk about them because now, but some of these are not, they're not from Guam, right? Because these are, because I see, for example, this is the Nosa, right?
So yeah. So I would say they're all from Guam, or they all,
Oh,
at least
yes.
have been from Guam. Yeah, the Nosa is a bit of a, you could get a little technical about it. They say the Guam subspecies is
Hmm.
extinct, but like, how different was it? Like, we had Nosa, we had this species, bridled white-eye. Um, and then same with the Gigi, the
Mhm.
Dooley, that's a big passion. But yeah, we could start with whichever one you want, and we can
Oh
chat
yeah.
through them.
So yeah, let's talk about this. Ah, the brittled white-eye, the Nosa.
Mm.
And so yeah, so did you take these pictures?
Yeah,
I
I took all of
so
these.
wow,
Um,
these are amazing pictures. This, oh my goodness.
oh,
So
thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
take us where did you take this picture and then tell us because I think especially for I think one of the things that I find is for those in Guam, there is kind of this feeling like we just don't have birds.
Mm,
And then for those in the CNMI, there's this feeling like there's plenty of birds.
mm,
And then so, but so there's this just this big gap. And so, talk to, I've seen the Nosa before, kind of, I've gotten to hear it a few times, but
mm.
talk, t tell us about this bird.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, like just on that point, I mean, I think like one thing I always try to emphasize, what people will say, oh, well, they were on Guam or they're not Guam birds anymore. Like for me, I mean, from early on, from my first few years, like I always want to kind of keep them in the memory and just say like they are Guam bird, they're native Guam birds. They're maybe temporarily absent, but like we can bring them back. And I think like just keeping them alive in the memory is huge for just keeping that potential because I think it's only a matter of effort. Like the capability is there, and others may disagree, but I think like to me, I mean, even one of my goals with my Instagram account is just which is at birds.guam, if anyone wants to check it out, is, like I try to intersperse birds that are on Guam with just the other native birds. But yeah, so getting to the Nosa. So Nosa,
Oh, here, let me show you your Instagram account real fast. So,
oh, right on.
and just because that's a, it is a great resource. It is a wonderful resource for people to, I mean, oh, there's the sasangat. Oh my goodness. It's so bonito. And it's so gorgeous.
They're so cool. They're so cool.
Wow. And I love, I loved it because I had believed that the sasangat was extinct. And
Mm.
then I remember talking to you and you were like, no, they're not.
Yeah, yeah.
They're
I mean,
still
so that, and
around.
even this post is about them showing up, turning up on Luta like in the last few years. And so, that's so close. I mean, we can see Luta in the distance, so basically we can see Sasanga like, and they were on Guam around the same time as they were up there. And so, yeah, and then the closest population where I took this picture is a Giguan, which is just the next island north from there. So, like maybe 100 miles if I'm not too sure, but not so far like as a Sasanga flies. So, yeah, like yeah, they're just incredible. Like what a cool. I mean, we could talk about them, but yeah, one of the coolest birds I think in the islands for sure.
Oh yeah. They're so cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Sassangat is one of those where it doesn't build a nest in the more traditional sense, right? It
Mm.
lays the egg on the ground and then it covers it with stuff, right?
Yeah, so they're called like scrub fowl or megapodes, but basically what they do on limestone islands is that they'll make basically like a big compost heap, like a big
Mm.
pile of leaf litter and soil. Then they'll kind of lay their eggs inside, and then basically they'll just monitor, make sure the temperature is just right. They'll remove material, add material. But otherwise, yeah, when the eggs are hatched, they just kind of claw, like they dig themselves out of there, the little chicks, and then basically they're good to go. I mean, they're super strong legs, and they're good to go, and they're pretty much self-sufficient from there. So all the parents will do is really just kind of make sure that they have this nice incubator set up for the birds. But what's cool is on volcanic islands, they'll actually use the volcanic heat. So they won't even do that compost pile. They'll lay kind of like near the calderas, and they'll use the volcanic ash to incubate the eggs. And so, like Sasanga in the Marianas, like on Guam, on Saipan, and then I guess it's FDM, the last limestone island. They'll be doing the incubation with kind of the big mounds, and then north of that, presumably, they're doing a lot more of the volcanic incubation. But I tried so hard to find a mound. I was not successful. I did see juveniles on a giguan and got some cool pictures of like a just smaller mini megapode. But yeah, I couldn't find the mounds, so I don't know exactly where they're hiding them.
That is so cool.
Mm.
That is so cool.
So like, yeah.
Oh, wait, and talk about the Sully. You had a post here about they continue to evolve in unexpected ways. And that's I mean, I know that I've read stories from around the world about how how humans, climate change, all these things are forcing species to adapt and stuff like that. But and some of those can be heartbreaking, but some of them, it comes down to animals' creativity,
Mm.
ingenuity, and stuff like that. And so, talk to us about how some of these bird species are like adapting.
Yeah, well, so Solly, I mean, Solly's like my bird. So that's a bird I moved to Guam to work with them. And so my first project when I moved to the island was surveying the population and basically designing a snake-proof nest box for this species. So the nest box you can see in the photos, like so I tested a whole bunch of different models, and this is kind of the one that ended up working the best. But yeah, basically, I mean, they are like one of the best stories, and there are several stories of birds on Guam that have kind of really kind of adapted, so to speak, to, and not from an evolutionary perspective, but really like a behavioral perspective to the presence of the brown tree snakes. And so the Sali in the 90s, they were down to something like 50 to 100 birds up there on Anderson, mostly a few scattered um, in the rest of the island. And now, like in our latest surveys, we're counting around 2,000 birds up there. So they've totally changed their lifestyle. And they used to be basically a forest bird, and they would kind of nest in the jungle, and then they would forage out there. Some of them also lived kind of more in village areas, and they would nest in telephone poles, that kind of thing. So Sali are cavity nesters. They nest in holes, holes that are already either in broken branches, maybe old sea heck nests, that kind of thing. Also, they really love the karsts, like the cliffs, and you could see cliffs with little holes in them, and it'll be like a full Sali like apartment building. But they couldn't really do that anymore because of brown tree snakes. So they basically just kind of all started nesting and breeding in urbanized areas, and especially on Anderson Air Force Base, where, like, if you've seen satellite images, it's lawn, it's pavement. There isn't much jungle in the built up areas. It's very kind of very manicured, and they've also like been doing brown tree snake suppression there since the 90s. So like you have 2,000 birds that are nesting in the urban area, but during the daytime they all go to the jungle, and so they go to like the limestone cliffs towards Anau, even all the way down towards, like, not all the way but towards Paget, and up north towards Patty Point. And so the ones, if they're breeding, they're just going back and forth to the jungle to forage, and then back to their kind of safe brown tree snake free breeding areas. And then, but if they're not breeding, they just spend the whole day out in the jungle. 3 or 4 p.m. comes around, they come back to the urban area, kind of socialize for a couple hours, and then just sleep, in their kind of relatively safe um, nests and roosting trees. And so we kind of like use that because even though they're relatively safe, they're still getting predated like crazy by brown tree snakes, even in those kind of,
Mm.
like manicured landscapes. And so what we were testing was if we protect the nest, are they going to be big enough and like safe from brown tree snakes to, you know, just be able to kind of thrive from there? Turns out once the fledglings leave the nest, they're still quite vulnerable, and so we learned something in doing it. But the nest boxes work amazing for keeping the birds safe for that nest period, and so yeah, that was basically like the big kind of first lesson, and then we just ended up learning so much about the Sali, about their role in the ecosystem, dispersing seeds. So this post I was kind of talking about how the nunu or the tatamona tree like are growing on some of the nest boxes. You can see that in that video.
Mhm.
And so, but like through the work we've done up there, like we found that Sali basically disperse every forest tree almost, like with a few exceptions. And so, including like, really culturally important trees like the nunu, which is also the tatamona tree, including doni, which is, like such a important kind of resource in the jungles and village areas, for making your denancy. And then like, but everything in between. I mean, basically they're like the heartbeat of the limestone forest ecosystem.
Wow. No, it's amazing. And so yeah, birds.guam. I'll put the link on the live stream for those of you so you can follow birds.guam. There's some great posts here. And then oh, here we'll
There it
definitely
is.
talk about this. We'll talk about this we'll talk about that one soon. The birding potential on Guam, but look at oh my goodness, these are so ah. Okay, wait. We got to talk about let's talk about I'm getting Magoda. I want to pinch, but let's talk about by all this. Let's talk about the Seahik because I've
Yeah,
already
that's a good
had
one.
somebody message me basically asking me, what about the Seahik? I want to know about the
Yeah, what about the sea?
Seahik. And so
Let's get to the good stuff.
because and of course, the Seahik is kind of like this is these two here, like the Taylor Swift and the Travis Kelce. I'm not exactly sure who Travis Kelce is. I think he plays football or something.
All
But
right.
I know that those two people are very important in the world right now.
We
And
heard your
so
Spotify list, so we know you're into that.
and so but of course they really captured a lot of people's attention, imagination. There was a lot of people who were very excited about the reintroduction into the wild and the successful reintroduction of the Seahik into the wild, because if they have eggs have been laid, right, and that
Mhm.
hatchlings, right, and so or if you can provide updates, because I know uh, talk about what has been going on in Palmyra Atoll, because people have been so excited to see
Mhm.
that, after so many stories, especially from Guam, in terms of just the loss and loss and loss, to at least see a story then of the Seahik flying and happy and eating in in the wild again. And so, what is going on now with the Seahik?
Yeah, so just to backtrack a tiny bit. So Seahek, among all the other species on Guam, so they were with a lot of the other forest birds, basically down to really low numbers in the 1980s, middle 1980s. So including the Nosa, the Koku, everything. And so at that point, it was kind of like crisis. And so, the birds were slowly disappearing from the middle of the island towards the north. And so the last populations of native birds were in, towards Luteksan, Anderson, those areas. And so some conservationists, including like Celestino Uggan from Guam DAWR, Bob Beck from DAWR, collaborators from the zoos, they pulled some of those last individuals into captivity. And so they pulled 29 Seahek, I believe, similar numbers of Koku. And so they were all shipped off to zoos. And so for the last almost 40 years, Seahek have been only in captivity, only in zoos, 20 some of the zoos in the mainland, also the Department of Ag facility in Manilao. And so for multiple generations, they've been just, in human care. And so finally, in 2024, there was a project that came together with a whole bunch of, different people, Fish and Wildlife, Nature Conservancy, who manages Palmyra Atoll. And they came together and were like, okay, like clearly things in captivity, they can't be in there forever. It's bad for their genetics, it's bad for their behaviors. So let's find somewhere to put them. And so there were different proposals, and the first one ended up being Palmyra Atoll. And so, yeah, like you said, I mean, they are kind of superstars. Like the first 9 birds, like if you follow them on social media, they're all named and they all have, different personalities. And so I believe it was August 2024, they were flown over from a facility in Kansas via California, Hawaii, and then down to Palmyra Atoll. And then they spent about a month in aviaries, getting used to the new environment, which is, like similar weather-wise. I mean, it looks like your background. Yeah, they were in aviaries for about a month, and then finally they opened the doors of the aviaries, and they were able to fly out. And so they were able to take their first flights in almost 40 years. And so they had a big kind of plan to provide them with supplementary food. They were a little worried about them being able to feed themselves, having been only fed by zookeepers, for generations, like I said, but they didn't need any of that assistance. They were able to kind of instantaneously just pull on their genetic instincts, and they never returned a single time for any supplementary food. And then they were, like the people in charge were worried, well, definitely some of them might not make it. They were expecting some levels of mortality. But as far as we know, like, so it's been a year, almost a year and a half. All 9 birds are still not only alive, but thriving. And so I kind of had the really great fortune of being able to go there for 10 weeks this past February. So from February to April of 2025. And it was just like action from day one when I was out there. So like when I first got there, a couple of pairs, they had started kind of pairing up into, there's four couples and then one lonely male that just roams the island looking for friends. Hopefully he'll get some friends soon. But the 4 pairs, they were starting one of the big kind of, part of their courtship. I mean, they're very kind of like flirtatious and very, like really cute to watch their interactions as couples. But one of their big things is they excavate. So they excavate and they take turns flying to these dead Nidzuk, and they will like make their nests in the trees, but not just one. Like they're excavating like crazy. One pair had 30 different excavations, and then they ended up picking their favorite. And so that was kind of the first few weeks, was just watching them um, you know start to find where they were thinking of maybe eventually nesting. And then one day I was out there and saw even steamier action. I saw the first mating in the wild for these birds, and the first one in again many decades. Then came the eggs. So I'll correct you, there haven't been any hatchlings yet
Oh,
on
thank you, thank you.
Palmyra. Hopefully soon. So they nested again a second time soon after I left. They're already again kind of like revving up again for another breeding season, but they're very young birds. So even like nobody really expected them to be nesting this early. And then when they did lay eggs, the idea was like they're probably not going to be fertile because no birds this young have ever been recorded with fertile eggs. But like it's coming. I mean, it'll be before we know it. And yeah, just so huge for that species. I mean, like they are, just like the numbers in captivity are actually dropping because birds are getting old and they're just hard to breed. And so this could be like a lifeline for the species. And they think there could be something like 30 or more pairs that could fit on Palmyra. And then, if they're breeding well and, they're just thriving. I mean, they're so healthy and they seem so happy out there. And so that could be, like a source for birds to bring to places like Islandano or other areas on Guam to, be able to kind of get them back home finally. Because Palmyra, for all like, the success, I mean, like the one downside is it's so far and it's really hard for people to go there.
Oh yes, and so somebody actually asked that, how do you get to Palmer Atoll? Like, is it do you have to ride like how many sea turtles do you have to ride on, or is there a direct flight, or do you have to go with Moana and Maui on like a
Yeah,
canoe? Like, what is the route?
yeah, that would be the way. No, you just gotta swim. No, basically fly to Honolulu, and then you hop on like this chartered like jet, like a little private plane, basically. So it's pretty cushy. There's like little mini fridge on the plane with whatever you need, and 3 hour flight. It's basically straight south of Honolulu. So it's a little island, no permanent residents, but the research station of about 15 to 25 people. They basically it's like what people call it is like a summer camp for adults. You just go, you do your work, stay in little cabins, eat together, and then there's like really good snorkeling and kayaking and that kind of stuff to keep you busy. But yeah, it's a different world. I mean, I've like for me it was kind of a paradise because it's just there's it's the most birds I've ever seen. Like literally behind the research station, it's like a flock of sooty terns, like a million birds. You can hear them any time of day there. It's one of the biggest colonies of red-footed boobies in the world. So they're just like flying into your cabins and just like squawking all over the place. And then like, you know, I mean, a whole bunch of other species as well. So the sea heck have a lot of friends out there, you could say.
Oh, oh, Bonito, that is so wonderful. That is so
Mm,
wonderful. And it is for me personally, it is. It is beautiful to hear because, my connection to the birds of the Marianas began with hearing stories from my grandmother
mm,
about birds, and then kind of realizing that all of the birds that she was talking about didn't exist on Guam anymore. And then even something like a cocoa bird when I was growing up on Guam was not around
mm,
anymore. People, of course, talk about how you used to hit cocoa birds with slingshots, or you
mm,
go out with your friends and you catch a cocoa bird and then you barbecue it and then you
mm.
eat it and stuff. But even when I was growing up
One
in
day,
the
one
80s,
day.
when I,
Yeah,
when I was growing up in the 80s in Guam, that you could there was cocoa bird. It wasn't like that anymore.
yeah.
And so um thinking then that the first times that I ever saw uh, a coco or a sihik was in San Diego
Mm, mm-hmm,
at the zoo.
mm-hmm,
And it was very like it was, and I was in grad school at UCSD, and I was at the zoo, and then I didn't even like really realize it until I was there that there was like a Guam bird there. And then I rushed over, and the Coco, of course, was very shy and hiding, and you couldn't really see it,
mm,
which
mm-hmm,
which makes sense, of course, because
mm.
that's the
That's
Coco.
them.
And then but it only struck me after that. I was excited that they were there, and then it stayed with me for a really long time.
Yeah. Mm,
That fact that like hearing stories from my grandmother about birds like the which
mm,
I had never seen or heard, but my grandmother loved the sound of.
Mm-hmm.
And then all these other birds that she talked about, and then it took years until I could see them and hear them in the CNMI. But so then kind of hearing these stories about the sea hick back in the wild, it's very touching. But
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying though, that it's just a step because
Oh, for sure.
we want these to be closer to where the people in the Marianas can connect with these birds again someday.
Yeah, and so like my goal when I was out there was really just like, you know, document like as much, take as many photos, just take it in and like share as much as possible. So I was trying to just get as many photos and stories up on online just so people can connect with it. But it's not the same. Like, and when I was out there, literally like half the time I was just so happy and like watching them, just being able to be like within 10 feet of them for hours. But then the flip side was like also like literally like I shed some tears out there just feeling like thinking about like how just like complicated it is to get them back to their home. And and it's not like the hardest part is um like actually making it happen. It's like the politics and the just like red tape and that kind of stuff that's just like so frustrating because it's yeah like it's those things are getting in the way of like I mean not to say it's easy, like it wouldn't be technically easy either, but like a lot of the it's been decades, like decades and decades since they've been gone, and it's all this kind of like issues at a high like kind of like bureaucratic level that are not all like moving in the same direction. So that was tough. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to share this real quickly because you were talking about the sea hicks and the look at this picture looks like
Yeah.
it's out of a rom-com. It looks like
Oh.
it's look at that. It's so cute.
Yeah, so that's Hinanao, which is the smallest male, and then Tutuhan, which is the biggest female, and they're such like characters. I mean, she just bosses him around. It's like it's so funny. But yeah, she you could tell she's not too happy. So he went around with this worm and tried to give it from this angle, then the other angle, then on top. Then eventually she took it from him and just dropped it to the floor. And so he picked it up and just kind of ate it himself and looked a little sad. But all
Oh.
the females, if the males bring them a gecko, they're happy. So that's what they really want. And none of these worms.
Oh, I indeed. And I mean, thank you for sharing these stories because I think for a lot of people this is it was meaningful to have because it's important that this work is happening, but it's so important that, for those of us that, these birds were part of our culture, part of our islands, they remain part of our people, even if things like the brown tree snake and other factors have kind of disconnected, have caused this terrible rupture, this tragedy. And so it's good that there's those like you who are trying to keep information flowing. So whatever is happening, we can remain connected to it. And so that it's not just this laboratory on the other side of the world,
Mm,
that we can still be engaged. So, Sidus Masi, Sidus Masi.
yeah,
And
much better.
now I want to talk about exploring the birding potential. I want to talk about birding on Guam. Your start small, start now. Um, yeah, you have this, you and Olympia Terrell, you both have sort of these great pieces in the PDN regularly talking about birds, and just kind of reminding people about birds in the landscape. And so your piece in particular, hold on, there it is. Too many screens open. Estigate, here it is. Don't sleep on Guam's birding potential. And I really liked it because I don't like this ad though. 28-day military workout plan for seniors. I don't like that the algorithm knows that I'm getting older, even though I am not a senior. I don't like that the algorithm is thinking that I'm a senior.
Look how ripped you can be
And
though.
so
Yeah.
I know. But and so I really liked this though. This and so um because it was a important reminder, your piece here about how even though we think about Guam as not having birds because there has been so
Mhm.
much loss, there's still lots of life on this island. And I love that. And so can you talk to us about kind of what motivated you to write this piece and what about don't sleep on Guam's birding potential?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, I think having, like learned about Guam for the first time in undergrad, right? And it was like the kind of cautionary tale about invasive species, and it's like brown tree snake got there and wiped out all the birds, and then when I was in Mauritius, like it was the same thing. They're talking about like it was kind of like ridiculous, but they were talking about snakes like dripping out of trees, and it's just being like like this kind of just like crazy place where like there's just an island covered in snakes. And then I got here and I'm like, okay, clearly like it's not the case, but I could see that that narrative has like affected people here too. And so a lot of the time when I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm working with a Sali, and they're like, oh, like I didn't think they were here anymore. Like I didn't know Guam had any birds. And then sometimes when I say, oh, I'm gonna go birding, or I just came back from birding, they're like, what? Like Guam doesn't have birds. And so like that I could see like that it's not just outside of the island that that story has really like taken hold. And so I mean, not to say that like brown tree snakes weren't devastating, like they were, like don't get me wrong, and I say it in the piece as well. Like you go into the jungle and it is like quiet, like it's almost silent. And but like I think it's important to remember, like Guam is not the only place where this is happening. Like you go to the jungle in a lot of other islands around the world, same thing. Like invasive species are a big issue globally. And so, you read about it in places that are like green, kind of like meccas, like New Zealand, and it's like they have silent forests too. Same in like certain areas in Hawaii. They have a lot of non-native birds, but it's like they've lost probably the same proportion of birds that Guam has. So like the difference is just really like it was recent and it was a snake, and then there's this whole kind of thing that like came out of it, of Guam being like the extinction of an avifauna. But like we still have not only like two of our forest bird species, the sali and the sazagua, but also like we have tsutsuko, like reef herons, like on the beach. We have like kakak all over the place. Tsungi are like almost, I wouldn't say thriving, but they're like in every village, and you could see them in Yoji and Dededo and in Chigo, like, and they're breeding in Aganya and in Tamuning and like all over. There's a lot of good stories too. And so, and then plus, plenty of seabirds, the fahang, like breeding in Malesu, and like, and that's not even to mention the migratory species, which I'm like very passionate about. And that's most of our birds, like most of the species that visit or that occur on Guam are migratory birds. And like what I like to remind people about those birds is they spend like most of their lives here for a lot of them. Like they spend 9 months out of the year here. The young ones spend years here before returning, and then they leave quickly to breed and come back. And so Guam is their home, and it's part of their life cycle. And it's the same birds coming back year after year. Like I had one 18-year-old doolittle, like Pacific golden plover, that I was watching like year after year, coming back to the exact same like square foot of. And so people, if you have a doolittle like in your lawn or on your ranch or whatever, like that's like an individual that comes back here. But yeah, I mean, long story short, Guam has like tons of birds, and they are totally fascinating. So like despite like, and I try to make the point, like I'm not saying we should just accept things as they are and be like, okay, cool, like we have birds still, like great. It's like we also like need to work to bring back the native birds. But I think it helps like to remember that like there are positive stories to just kind of get that momentum.
Oh, definitely. No, definitely. I mean, I think what really struck me about your piece is that it comes at a time when the island's visitor industry is going through kind of a reimagining, an identity crises. I don't know if you could
Mm,
call it a crisis, or they're just trying to,
no.
they're trying to figure
Probably.
things out and trying to reimagine themselves. And, one thing that always keeps coming back is Guam, how is Guam going to compete with other places? And if you're trying to compete in ways where they're going to be cheaper or they're going to do all of these other things that Guam has tried to do in the past, but they're going to be cheaper and they're going to be bigger and this and that, well, then you always just have to focus on what you have.
Mm,
Don't try to be other places. Just focus on what you have and build up what you have. And don't try to pretend that you're Las Vegas because people can go to Las Vegas.
yeah.
Don't try to pretend that you're Tahiti because people can go there. Don't try to pretend that you are this place. People can go there now. That was the old model of tourism that
Mm,
Guam built on, was this idea that it's hard for people in Asia to go to all these places.
mm,
Guam's right there, so we're going to copy these other places and
mhm,
they will settle for Guam and they'll just come here. It's not like that anymore. A Japanese or South Korean tourist, if they want to go to those types of places, they can just go there. So
mm,
what we need then is to give them an enriching experience that is here, not let them come here and then realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And so I think, you know, authentic, grounded branding, which is kind
mm,
of what we have, and letting people in on the landscape. Stop trying to cover over the landscape. Stop trying to like look. Don't look over here. Whatever you do, don't look over here, because that's what Tumon is built on, right?
mm,
Hey, don't whatever you do, don't visit anywhere else in the island. Just stay in Tumon. And so, but what we're seeing now is that tourists want to go out, they want to visit
mm,
more places, they want to drive around. And so when I was reading your piece in particular, I thought, for the Marianas, for Guam, CNMI for Guam, building up slowly, sort of little by little, sort of an industry around birds,
mm,
be very fruitful.
mhm,
Because people, it is just one of those things that, and it would push back, and it's, because birds are something that discerning tourists are always looking for.
mm,
Not everybody is always looking for birds, but discerning tourists, and especially those who you might want to, I'm sure some people have economic data on like birders and people who are
mm,
interested in birding and how much they spend here or there, whatever. But that might be something to tap into, that if you branded the Marianas in a certain way as developing up that potential. And the thing is, it doesn't hurt the environment to do that.
no, I mean,
In
quite the
fact,
opposite.
it would help. Yeah, it would help bring resources into the types of programs that would support protecting the environment. So that's your piece here, and I hope more people read it, because
Mm,
imagine if there was around the island, because imagine if around the island there was more signage that engaged people with the types of birds that you are likely to see here
mm,
and stuff like that, because I see that in other places. I see that in other places that have economies around their birds, is that you might see these birds because that place has said that these are important things for visitors here. Is that some national parks have it? They say, hey, you might see these species here, to
yeah.
engage people. And so your piece really brought that to the front of my mind.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you saw it in that way, and I think, there really is. I mean, there is a ton of potential, and so just, from the start and kind of based on what you're saying, like, like to me, like Dono was always, so kind of like such an amazing place to visit, and I always visited it even when it was open. but I felt like there was untapped potential there too because of like the focus was on let's sit on the beach and it wasn't on like the koku which was there and at that time it was like quite visible like they were roaming around the yards around the buildings and like next to the buffet and all that and so people would be there and be in the pool but there wasn't really like kind of opportunity for people to engage with like that iconic bird and then now it's like fallen apart but there are still hardcore people and I've brought birders there and there are more coming like next year and people who do these big kind of travels but then in Molesso you have the Fahang that have been somewhat controversial like don't get me wrong but I think for tourists it's an amazing thing to see and you can see tourists stopping and taking pictures and you get these amazing trees full of like hundreds if not thousands of native birds and so that's another thing but like to me it can just go on from there like one of the projects that I've been working on is like trying to eradicate brown tree snakes from Dano that they unfortunately ended up there and so keeping it safe for the koku but also like potentially bringing back sea heck there and imagine like that as a experience for tourists they go to PIC they see a Shecky or Seaheki or whatever they call them, and it's all about Seahek, but they don't get to see any actual Seahek, but that could be incredible. And then on the main island, like not to get a little too kind of pipe dreamy, but like one like incredible thing that could happen is actually building an eco sanctuary for native birds and that's not like so far fetched because it happens in a lot of like islands like New Zealand is a prime example their prime tourist destination is an urban eco sanctuary for birds so something like 200 hectares that was just kind of like it was a water treatment plant basically they turned it into this thriving just in 2000 eco sanctuary where now there's dozens of reintroduced species and so you do the same thing somewhere in like, Tumon or towards Two Lovers or that kind of thing, and like, you know, get rid of the snakes, fill it with totut, with nosa, igigi, chichirika, and like that's somewhere like you could bring busloads of tourists, and so you don't have to be like Palau and be like like the Costa Rica, the Pacific, like people are just as into that kind of thing where it's like active restoration and you can actively get involved and that's why people enjoy coming out to Dano to look for brown tree snakes and we do get a lot of visitors as well not just like plenty of locals too but it's like people visit and they feel like oh like we contributed positively to the environment while we were visiting and so that's like extra satisfying and so to be able to do that in a way where it's like okay you're visiting you're seeing an active restoration project and getting to learn and getting to see native birds like couldn't be better than that so I think like yeah that's like the potential I mean that's like an amazing thing to think about for GVB for anybody it's like we can do that like that is possible and so yeah like what a cool thing to dream about.
Oh man, agreed. Agreed. No, I love that, especially because I ever since sort of the tourist adventure at Donu kind of closed down,
Mm,
I've been eager to find out what happens next to it because I always loved, going there with my family just to kind of get away and the fact that there was so many birds there, the fact that it was kind of full of life and I loved that
mm,
place turning it into, I mean, I love your vision of that. And I think that, looking at I'm hopeful that that kind of, what you've kind of described there in terms of leaning into restoration, leaning into kind of bringing life back, not kind of the world has a crap load of concrete already,
mm,
like, and And do people really want to spend a whole bunch of money to go to those types of places? Like
mm,
if you're really kind of looking for something to sell tourists to fly across the ocean to get to, sell them off of something in which it's filled with culture, filled with life, filled with hope.
Mm,
I mean, that's one of the reasons why people will spend so much more money to go to Palau than they will to go to Guam. Is because there is Palau has this kind of this environmental buzz around it that Guam does not have. Jellyfish Lake, kind of all this green fee, all of these things around it, which means that people are like willing to spend more to go there for all of the natural beauty. You can find concrete roads, hotels, all you can find those any describing though, because imagine if you leaned into this idea of pushing back against kind of the loss and said this is a place in which we're kind of restoring our jungles and stuff. And because it's always been like this little piecemeal thing, especially based on things like federal funding.
mm,
But imagine if there was a possibility to really lean into it and then it became an inspiring story, just like how certain countries in the world have developed huge tourism industries around that today, where people from around the world will go there to see what this country is doing to protect the rainforest.
mm.
This country is doing to protect their coral reefs. This country is doing for this and that. And so there is a lot of potential there. But and so we are out of time, but I want to give you a chance to share any final thoughts or any final sort of message that you have, if you want to encourage people to follow you again or to check something out, it's up to you. Or if you want to share a bird story, anything that you want to share kind of just as a parting message.
Yeah, well, for sure. I think yeah, I would say so if people want to get involved, come out to Dono. I mean, you should come, bring your family, and I gotta wait for you to get out there. So we can, so with Friends of Isandano, we go out almost every Saturday, and just look for brown tree snakes. And if we find them, it's exciting. We try to remove them. And if not, we see just tons of cool stuff. It's full of azuzu, full of, native large geckos, birds. And so it's a way of kind of actively giving back to the environment. If people want to do a bit of birding, they can come out for the Christmas bird counts with Marianas Audubon Society. So just look up either of those on social media. Yeah, whatever people do, I would just encourage people to like actively get involved, actively give back. I mean, it doesn't have to be hunting for snakes if that's not your thing. Cleanups, planting native species. Like I think what we talked about, just like, to be an active steward and participant in like, protecting and restoring the native ecosystem is like a really satisfying way of just giving back and of kind of showing, visitors that we care about the island. So just encourage people to get involved in whatever way they see fit.
Sidus Mase. Sidus Mase. Oh man, I always love talking about birds in the Marianas and Sidus Mase, and I love learning about birds in the Marianas. It is one of those things because, for me, not being able to kind of see a lot of especially our native birds, to see them, to hear them, I love learning about them. And so, this has been great
That's cool. That's cool, Miguel.
for
Well,
me.
I mean, I've always learned a lot from you over the years, but I would say with birds, it's never ending, man. There's just so much you can learn. Just like every bird has its own story, its own migration, its own life history. When it's a cool thing. That's why it's like you don't have to be a full-on geek to be a birder. You could just kind of learn a little bit here and there, and it'll never get old.
Oh man, Biba, si Zeus Masi Martin para ifinatomu para este episode finatsu zan si Zeus Masi para todos hamzu ni ume egad zan ume ekungok este finakpo este episode finatsu. Adios.